Welcome to Association Chat, an online discussion where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire with topics of the day, welcoming thought leaders and trailblazers alike to join up in this online home for the community. I'm the host of Association Chat, KiKi L'Italien, and I am thrilled to introduce our guest for today's episode, a true visionary and tech entrepreneur, Amith Nagarajan. Amith is the chairman of Blue Cypress, a family of purpose-driven companies that focus on helping associations and nonprofits achieve long-term sustainable success. Amith has a wealth of knowledge to share about the future of AI, about machine learning, and the impact that these technologies will have on organizations of all sizes. But that's not all. Amith is also an accomplished author with his book, The Open Garden Organization, a blueprint for organizations in the digital age. And there's a new book on the horizon that we'll talk about. So sit back, relax, get ready to learn from one of the brightest minds in the association and nonprofit tech world. I want to welcome Amith. Amith, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi there, KiKi. Thanks for having me, and thanks for those kind words.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I want to get into all of the exciting news of the things that you're getting into in the new book. But of course, first, what's on everyone's minds and what everyone's talking about and excited about, AI. You have been talking about AI and the ways that associations can use AI for years. Your companies incorporate AI into the work and the solutions that are provided. But I would like for you to just put into context for us how AI and machine learning has really changed the association industry in recent years.
Well, I think it's a question of what will change as much as it is around what has changed. I think we're at an inflection point right now. So in the broader sense of AI, the capabilities that we have available today, either for a very low cost or for free, are truly stunning. And so people are paying attention, and that's super exciting. Associations obviously are not a one size fits all thing. So some have been experimenting with AI, I think generally in very limited ways. But I think that now associations are starting to realize that all aspects of their work will be affected by AI, and that they need to figure out how to do it and how to do it responsibly, how to do it effectively. And so it's really exciting to see what's about to happen. I think that if you were to ask me that question 6 months ago, I would have said there's very few use cases of AI. There's a handful of them around content personalization, things like that, but not really anything super deep. But that's all about to change.
Yeah. I mean, I think about, I thought it was exciting to see what was happening with voice and with all of the stuff, that we saw with our, Alexa devices. And, I really thought that this idea of reaching out, speaking out into the air and having the air answer back was just like magic. But then what has happened with Chat GPT and looking at generative AI since like last November, that reminds me of, I likened it to being like a calculator where it was just like, this is something that once you use it, you keep seeing the different ways that you can use it. I can never imagine not using it.
Sure.
Once I got into that. But a lot of people are scared and nervous. And so I feel like, for someone who's been watching all of this sort of build and build and build over time, what are your thoughts about now that ChatGPT has been made available to so many people, the amount of change that is going to happen in maybe say the next year to 2 years?
It is going to be a wild ride. It's going to be extraordinary. I don't think it's going to be slow and measured. No matter what we think, no matter what we prefer, everybody's got a different point of view on this. There's really two camps. There's the cautious, and there's the people that are out there super excited. And then there's people who have kind of a blend of both views. But regardless of what your particular opinion is, this stuff's happening. We're at this inflection point in this exponential growth curve, and it's happening quickly. So in the next 12 months, First of all, I think the adoption rate of generative AI, which includes tools like ChatGPT, it also includes tools like DALL-E and Stable Diffusion and Midjourney, which are these image generation tools, they're going to get a lot better. So one of the things people don't really pay attention to is the pace of change or the pace of improvement. So a lot of people are familiar over the last, say, 30, 40 years with this idea called Moore's Law, which was when, famously one of the founders of Intel said that the number of transistors in a chip will double every 18 to 24 months for the same price, which is a key component of that law. Well, that's been happening, obviously, with computing, which ultimately powers AI. But with AI, it's even faster. AI power is doubling relative to price every 6 months.
Yeah.
Every 6 months. So in the next 6 months, we're going to have a doubling. And then in another 6 months, we're going to have another doubling. So it's like 4x as powerful as where we are today. There'll be a lot of things happening. So one example is Microsoft and Google both recently announced in the last couple of weeks significant enhancements to their core productivity suites. And Microsoft calls it Copilot, which is this ability within Word and Excel and in PowerPoint to have the tool do work alongside you. I think Copilot is a great name because it really indicates the person is still in charge, but they're getting the help of a really valuable assistant. And so as people experience that, I think that's part of what's going to change their mindset because, all the drudgery of manual work, a lot of it goes away. It's coming back to your question of what's going to happen. There's a lot more generative AI that's coming. What we've seen is literally the first inning. It's the very basic stuff. It's generating text. It's generating basic images. Already, for example, with Midjourney 5, there's much more photorealistic image generation available. A lot of the early flaws in DALL-E and Stable Diffusion and Midjourney have been fixed already, and there's more coming. One example would be, let's say I go to a tool like GPT and I say, hey, write me a short story. And it writes me a beautiful short story. I give it feedback, I interact with it, and I have a short story. And now I say to a different AI model, now turn this into a movie. And it generates a movie for me, right, based on that. Now, part of the trick with all this stuff is to know how to interact with these AI tools, to prompt them correctly and so on. But the movie creation part is in a very, very early phase. People are doing that already. But by the end of the year, I think we're going to see some pretty incredible stuff where certainly for business purposes, you imagine an association creating a promo video for an upcoming conference. You type in the script or you have the GPT tool do it and you have a beautiful video generated. And there's a lot more, right? That's just one simple use case.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so exciting because if you have, for so long, we've talked about the fact that our associations they're collecting great data on members and the types of activities, the interests of members and all kinds of things that our associations are collecting along the way. But how we use that has always been such a challenge. And so now that we have something where, like generative AI, where once you are able to locate that data and it's accurate, you're able to then have these follow-up actions and this sort of follow-up activity that happens as a result. It seems like the possibilities to really do things like connect with your members are endless. But
they really are. A couple of things that your comment really, I think, leads me to want to explain a little bit is one is related to data itself. So people talk a lot about data and AI, and there's always this assumption to use AI, you need a lot of data. And there's some truth to that with certain types of models, but the ones that are what are called foundation models. So GPT is an example. Foundation models essentially are pre-trained on large data sets. So if you've heard the term LLM, it stands for large language model. GPT, Bard, these other tools are large language models. And they're trained on essentially the internet, right? So they're trained on lots and lots of content. So if you had your own model trained on your own data, would it take a lot of data to do something useful? The answer is yes, but that's the cool thing about these models becoming popularized is you can get a lot of utility without any data. I do want to say one more thing about data. So I ran a CRM company in this space for 20 plus years. And what I would tell you is that I think the data that associations think they've collected about their members as being really great stuff is often not. and it's a very kind way
Yeah.
to put it. And there's this term in the data science field called data decay, which is the rate at which data becomes less and less valuable, ultimately actually becoming a negative value. It's not just zero, but like if I think KiKi is really interested in AI, and maybe you were 6 months ago, but now you're not. You have no
Right.
interest in AI. And I
Right.
still send you AI stuff. That's worse than knowing nothing about you. And so, one of the really cool things about AI is it'll help you learn your audience a lot better than you ever knew them before. And then you can use that, as you had pointed out, to really personalize the engagement experience. Um,
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing that I was always interested in is not the who do you necessarily think I am right now? It's the who am I saying I want to be in the future? And so to me, thinking about the capabilities of almost programming the path that you want to take, and telling that if people understand better how to interact with the AI and the types of things that it's capable of, put me on this path. I might have this role. I might have these interests today because this is what my job asks me to do. But if I want to be over here doing something totally different, put me on that path. How do I get and not just, I'm going to stop by that session during the annual meeting, but like all the way through. I want that experience to sort of lead me in that direction. So, I mean, I think, the possibilities of sort of proactively guiding your own experience is also just really exciting to me.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. And one of the things about, all of us is that we're not necessarily the best at understanding our own interests and
mhm,
understanding our own paths. And so a lot of people will use the term digital exhaust, which is essentially like, the trail that you leave as you do stuff, whether it's, browse social media or go to the web or searches or whatever. And that digital exhaust is actually a very interesting data input for AI, where, for example, with like personalized newsletter recommendations, one of the companies in our family just does that, right? It's called Rasa. They just do personalized newsletters. They actually find that the personalization that comes from the behavior of the user is way, way more predictive and valuable for what that user is going to want to read next, more so than what they even may have told you about their interests. So anyway, it's really interesting. It's kind of this intersection of human behavior and like all these capabilities we have with tech to deliver a better experience to our members.
yeah, I almost wish that there could be something that would step in at some point and say, do you really want to know, like, do you really want to watch that next cat video? Or are you truly on the path of wanting to learn more about something that's way more advanced? I want to be more like Amith. So give me the videos that Amith is watching, Okay, so if we're not talking about this sort of the shadow archetype where I'm following what the pathway is for these other people, what about training? I mean, what about association leaders who are looking at things that are technologies advancing so fast? Now they have to worry about if their people know how to use chat GPT prompts, what goes into a good prompt, if they should disclose if they're using a tool like chat GPT.
Sure.
So what would you advise to association leaders right now who are saying, should I even let my people play with this stuff? What am I supposed to be doing?
Well, I mean, on the last question, your people are playing with this stuff. So whether you let them, in quotes, is really kind of a non-conversation. So the point I would tell you is that most people who are having the conversation about the theoretical aspects aren't really super deep in actually using these tools. Not that they're
Hmm.
mutually exclusive, but I would focus on getting practical experience with the really basic tools and encouraging everyone in an organization to immediately start to use these tools to gain awareness. So the way I like to describe this is we are going through a change that's an order of magnitude, perhaps multiple orders of magnitude, meaning like if you think about it in terms of prior technology transitions, it's like going from, riding a horse to flying in a hypersonic jet, right?
Wow.
That's what's happening right now. So if you imagine, okay, horseback rider is now sees the Wright brothers take air for the first time. Cool. Look at it, and there's a couple ways to look at it. It's like, what the hell is this? I don't want to see this. This is against nature, whatever. I don't like it. What are all the reasons why this is bad? And then, of course, there's people who are saying, wow, this is amazing. This opens up a whole bunch of possibilities that really are things we've never even been able to think about. So if flight never existed before in the popular imagination, and all of a sudden you have human flight, what do you do with it, right? It's a
Yeah.
technology platform. What are the applications? Well, until you've actually experienced it, you really don't know, right? So you have to start getting into this stuff. And the reason I point out, like going from, horse-drawn buggy or being on horseback to hypersonic jet travel, which is not where we're at yet, right? It's a situation where you are going to see so much rapid pace. The only chance you have to actually stay relevant in your own job is to just make sure you're staying aware of all these things. And it starts with simple stuff. Sure, ChatGPT is great. Try that out. Try out the new Bing. Try out Google stuff. Take every opportunity you can to be curious and to learn. And that's the most important thing to really get into your culture of your business, is that everyone needs to learn this stuff, because that's how you're going to get that awareness to then think about, okay, how can we use this stuff in a little bit deeper way?
Yeah. Do you think, based off of what you've seen so far and what you see happening in regards to just how quickly things are progressing, since everyone started interacting with some of the generative AI tools, do you think that we're going to see a lot more adoption into customization for association members? Or do you think that people are going to get so distracted by all of these other new things that they can do that we're kind of going to be in the same place that we are in right now for like another 2 years? What do you think will happen with that?
I think the short answer is it depends on the organization and the space they're in. So I think some organizations are going to adopt these tools for really rudimentary things first, learn them really well, and that will get the gears moving so that they'll start to realize the opportunities or the other capabilities, the other ways to take advantage of these capabilities. Let me kind of paint two categories that I think are interesting to frame AI opportunities. One is to do what you currently do better, faster, or cheaper, right? So it's like, what is our current business model and how do we do what we do? And that business model might be one person in their job. It might also be the entirety of the organization. So how can we do what we already do, but do it better, faster, or cheaper, or all three, right? Which normally you pick one or two of those at best, not all three, but now really all three are available. So for example, when we talk about writing content, or we talk about, producing an event, there's just so many pieces of that can be automated now with AI, or mostly automated with AI. You can go better, you can have a better product, you can move faster, and you can also do it for less cost, right? So that's one category, is do what you do now and do it better, faster, cheaper. The other category is stuff you haven't thought of yet. So it's new business models. It's truly innovative stuff. Doing what you do now, better, faster, cheaper, is great, but your members don't care. Your members care about if you've given them more value. So one of the fundamental questions that I want association CEOs and everyone else to be asking is, what are the problems, not that we have as the association, but what are the problems our members have? What are they faced with on a daily basis? So for example, if I'm an association of biologists or an association of accountants, what are the things that my members are faced with that we could potentially help with, not necessarily with the services we currently offer, but with the assets we have that could be combined with these new tools. So I'll give you an example of that. Associations are, generally speaking, very well regarded in their profession or in their industry. Not universal, obviously, just like it isn't with anything else in life, but most associations are pretty well respected in their space. So if I'm the state association for CPAs or accountants in my state, I'm probably considered one of the more reputable brands in the space. That's really valuable, but it's not activated. Another thing is associations tend to have really good content. Maybe not the most content, but they tend to have trustworthy content.
Right.
And that's really, really important, especially in the world we're in with generative AI. And so using those things, what could we do differently for our members to potentially engage them? And so tools like ChatGPT, for example, Bloomberg just announced that they have the Bloomberg GPT. And that is, for people who aren't familiar with them, they're a financial content company. And they have, an amazing amount of content in the financial services arena. And so they've created a large language model based on one of the existing ones that uses their proprietary content to serve their customers. Now, the same thing can be done for associations. An association could create their own version of a GPT trained on their content. I think that's just one of many opportunities that's out there. And why would that be valuable, I should say, is that the member now has trustworthy, valuable content driving that kind of interaction, rather than if you go to ChatGPT, sometimes you get something that's brilliant, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you get garbage. And that's because it's trained on the internet. And
Yeah.
lots of the internet is really cool. And there's lots of the internet that's not, right? So that's the thing you got to be careful about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when I was thinking about talking with and thank you for answering that and explaining kind of two different modes, two different types of organizations and how they're looking at it, because um there's so many questions that I thought I can ask Amith. I have him trapped on my show. I can ask him all kinds of things. And one of those was to put your entrepreneurial hat on and to look, you have run all kinds of businesses and all kinds of organizations. You're doing that now, but it's what if you were the head? What if you were put in charge of an association in this environment where we know that the association sector, we've long heard the stories about our association still relevant and how they're fighting for that relevancy. But in a time like now, when there are so many for-profit competitors and that kind of thing out there, if somebody put Amith in charge of an association today, what would you do? What would be like the first three things that you would do so that that association would be in a stronger position by the end of the year?
Sure. I love the question. And it's actually the framing for the new book that you mentioned earlier, which is basically this scenario where there's a new leader appointed to run an association in this age of AI. And what does that person do? So it's a fictional narrative that also is accompanied by some explanation. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this. So within Blue Cypress, we have 20 different brands within our family, and we have leaders that run those companies, and we have a team at the HQ that runs the whole business. So my job is primarily to talk to a lot of association leaders, to talk to company leaders, to see what the problems are that are out there, to look for opportunities, that kind of thing. So it's super fun, by the way, and it's a real privilege to get to do that all day. But I think a lot about this problem. And so if I were a newly appointed association executive director and I had the rest of this year, so roughly 9 months, to figure out how to make some tangible progress, I would do three things. Number one is I would start with awareness. I would spend time with my team. Now, I'm going to presuppose in this scenario that I'm not an AI expert in this hypothetical scenario. I just am someone who has an interest in it and an openness to it. I would start off by leading by example and immersing myself in learning about AI. And I would bring my whole team with me, not just my senior leadership. That's one of the big mistakes newly appointed CEOs make, is they spend all their time kind of cloistered in the nice oak paneled rooms. Nowadays, they're virtually oak paneled rooms, but the CEO suites and the leadership suites and all that, where you're talking with your senior leadership. Get out of there and go talk to the 22-year-old college kid who just graduated and is in their first job, because they're probably already doing a lot of things that you're dreaming of or you're hoping to do. So include everyone in your organization on this learning journey and start off by putting a stake in the ground that says, listen, we are going to be an AI native organization in the next 12 months, which means that we're going to understand it, we're going to adopt it, we're going to experiment with it. So awareness is step one. Mm-hmm. And the next thing, and awareness is just basically the openness and the curiosity. Curiosity is like a really missing ingredient in business, in my opinion. Like, we're born naturally curious, and then the school system and then work tends to beat the hell out of us, and it just gets rid of curiosity, because curiosity often results in failures, and because it results in experiments, which result in failure, and then you get chastised for that, and then all of a sudden, all your curiosity has been beaten out of you. We need to bring that back. So curiosity and awareness need to come together. That's step one. The next thing I would do is focus on education, which is to go deeper, right? It's to say, hey, let's really understand what this stuff is. And I'd work that layer with not just the staff leadership, but the volunteer leadership, and maybe even some people outside of that. That would include taking courses on AI, running boot camps, working with my team to really, really get into this stuff and go deeper. And that might be, a couple months of that, but it's a never-ending cycle, right? And then the final thing is to instill a culture and a mindset around experimentation. It kind of goes back thematically to the same idea of curiosity, but I would ask my team to try things in small quantities, make mistakes, and openly share them. And that's a big culture shift for a lot of people. Association leaders tend to ask, well, what happens if this doesn't work? And my response generally over the course of the last 30 or so years that I've been doing this stuff is to say, well, what happens if you don't try? Because if you don't try, I can pretty much guarantee you're screwed.
Yeah.
So give it a shot, fall on your face a few times, learn from it. So for me, it would be those three things. It's awareness, followed by education, followed by experimentation. But then once you have that going, you keep repeating that cycle.
Oh, I love that. I think that's great advice. And it's a really great point about the curiosity too, because I feel like in this day and age that if you don't afford yourself the ability to be curious, you're really cutting yourself off from adapting and from change and also from delight. There's so many great things, you cut yourself off from discovering how wrong you can be when things change from one moment to the next, and people change too. And so I think that that's such a great point about instilling that sense of curiosity and putting that into the culture. One of the questions that, and I know that you've been written about in books about culture and leading by example, but one of the questions that I hear often about culture is it's easy to talk about, it's harder to do. What's one of the ways that you would, and this is a follow-up question to the previous, what's one of the ways that you would make sure that you're on the right track with creating a culture that supports experimentation and curiosity?
Well, I think you have to lead by example with respect to your willingness to be vulnerable, and that starts off with sharing your failures. Talking
Yeah.
about what's not going well. So just going out there and trumpeting victories is really not super helpful. I mean, it's great to do when it makes sense, but I think you have to start off with creating an environment where people are willing to share what went wrong rather than like covering it up, right, and pretending it never existed. So that's one big piece of what I would focus on and what I think is really important in organizations I'm involved with. AI is interesting because, people talk about it's like, oh, we've been through lots of technological transformations. We went through the internet coming online. We went through, automobiles. We went through, the printing press, right? If you go back in history, several generations. And it's the right way to think about it. It's like, this is a major technology change. It's going to enable lots of stuff we couldn't do before. But it's faster. That's the thing that's different, is it's happening so quickly. And so I think that it like doubles, triples, quadruples the need to be mindful of, if you lead by example, if I go in front of a new organization as the new CEO and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have a culture of innovation. We're going to make change happen. And then I go and I kind of shut myself off from the world and I'm unapproachable, either like as perceived or reality. It's not going to help because people aren't going to be willing to take any risks in that environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think people in general we've just gone through an immense time of change because of the pandemic, where, if you had to look for a silver lining, the silver lining might be that organizations were forced to do things like try Zoom and try having meetings in different ways. And it did force people out of their comfort zones, for good or for ill, to try to find new solutions for things and new ways to do them, which is handy when we're looking at things like climate change. That's also asking that we figure out new ways to do things, because we don't know if the place that we're going to go to is necessarily going to be open to us in the future. So with that in mind, now that we're seeing how quickly people are looking at these tools that are available to everyone now, how do you suggest that leaders sort of deal with their own, I don't want to say fear of change, because they could be really brave, but if they've been dealing with a board trying to move them through change for the past several years, it might be hard for them to get them on board with even more change.
Yeah, I get it. And, it's interesting because I've never run an association. I've been on boards of lots of nonprofits over the years, and I can empathize with how challenging it is for a leader in that role. As the founder of a number of different, privately held companies, I've had much broader authority than a lot of CEOs of associations get to enjoy in their roles. So I definitely feel for them. That being said, growth and comfort are mutually exclusive. Jenny Rometty, who's the former CEO of IBM, she has an amazing new book that just came out. One of her phrases that I love is comfort and growth don't coexist. So yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that, but now it's time to figure out what we're going to go do about it, right? And we got to get the board on board. And the way we do that is just kind of force them with the existential threat that exists if we don't adopt this new technology. Make it real for them. Talk to them about how it's applicable in their world if they're not already thinking about it. I think one of the cool things about what happened in November with ChatGPT and with 100 millions of users and soon to be billions of users in Google Workspace and Microsoft's environments is that everyone sees how transformative this stuff is. So it's a lot easier to have that conversation. So even if you're dealing with kind of the crustiest and mustiest board that's unwilling to change, go back to them now and say, listen, the world's changed. We better get on with it and make some changes here. So, but I think also part of it is, I know there are certain things that people have different levels of comfort with, but I'm a big fan of the idea that and again, I'll preface this with within reason, it's easier for the CEO to beg for forgiveness than to ask for permission. So don't go to the board for little micro details. Even if the board has conditioned you through daily beatings that you need to go to them for every little micromanagement decision, which is not every board, but some boards are like that, just stop doing it and take some risk personally in your career to make some decisions and experiment with this stuff. You don't need the board's approval for everything. And a lot of people have this really, really rigid mindset that they need to go and just ask for permission for everything. And that the case, even if you had the most amazing board in the world, they're not available to you frequently enough to make those decisions for you. So again, I speak from having had the luxury of not having to seek those kinds of approvals in my career. So I get that I also am a bit out of my element in stating all that. But I just think there's some of this kind of entrepreneurial craziness that we need to apply in this market a little bit.
Well, in the interest of talking more about this whole idea of comfort and growth not coexisting, there is also the idea of, well, is faster necessarily better? And this is going so fast that do we need to put guardrails in place before we keep going? Or do we need to slow down to figure out the ethics and legal ramifications around all of this? Because there have been those issues about like concerns about privacy and concerns about intellectual property. And so Jeff DeCania, who we both know, he posted something earlier today that was an open letter to the association community talking about generative AI and listing a number of concerns. And so I wanted to broach this topic because I know that we're just at the beginning of more conversations about this. But one of the things that is a suggestion from people like Jeff. And then also we see the letter where, Elon Musk has signed on, and it's like asking for everyone to sort of say time out on growth while we figure stuff out. What are your thoughts on this? Because I kind of feel like genie's out of the bottle. I cannot imagine people not using it's like, look, I have to admit, like once I started using the GPS to get places, I didn't stop, and it would have been really hard for me to stop even if somebody suggested it was a good idea. So.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that it's a really important conversation. And I think any new sufficiently advanced technology needs to be thought of from both the advantages of it, the benefits of it, and what are some of the concerns. How can it be misappropriated? How can it be used for harm? How can we ensure that the way we're using it is beneficial and has the least in the way of potential side effects, right? So it's a really important conversation. I do think ethics has a critical role to play in AI, but I think it's a parallel role to the development of AI. Because as a practical matter, no matter how many people sign on to various documents, nothing's going to stop. Nothing's going to slow down. It's going to keep going, faster and faster and faster. So I don't think that it's reasonable to say that we should self-impose a ban on this or stop for a period of time because we're just going to fall further behind that way. I think that's the exact opposite of what you should do. The other reason I feel that it's the exact opposite of what you should do is you don't have a chance to learn anything if you just sit there and talk about it instead of actually using the stuff. So if you get out there and use these tools, then you actually understand them rather than speaking to them purely from a theoretical view, and you understand them more deeply. And as the tools evolve, you're not so far behind where you are playing catch up and catch up and catch up. So I think the idea of should AI as an industry sit on the sidelines? I think that's a great conversation for the philosophy department at the closest university, but not for me to answer, because I'm an entrepreneur and I'm going to say, hey, practically speaking, it's not going to happen. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time thinking about it. I will say that there should be caution about AI, because it's a tool we don't understand completely, right? We don't, in fact, in many ways, we don't understand it that very, very well at all. Even the people who build AI in some respects don't understand exactly how it works. So that's a little bit scary. I totally understand that. But I don't think you can solve for that issue by ignoring it or trying to box it in or any of these things. I think you have to embrace it, understand it, and then find out how to use it for good. Which is the other point I'd make, is that, for example, in the case of cybersecurity as one use case, AI has the potential to blow up cybersecurity as we know it today, and both on the bad side, so hackers can use AI to come up with novel attacks. Just for example, think about phishing attacks, which is the kind where it's really a social engineering thing rather than a technical, where I send you an email trying to pretend to be your bank and then try to get you to click a link. Well, those attacks are going to get way more sophisticated, because generative AI makes it possible to send billions of emails that really look like they're, personalized for you or from your friend. That's really scary. The flip side is that generative AI can also be used to help improve our defenses against those kinds of attacks. So it's kind of like move, counter move, move, counter move. And that's true with AI, just like it is with a lot of other technologies. So I think it's a great conversation to have. I love being part of those discussions, but I think it's a parallel conversation to have with also learning the technology and starting to implement it. Now, let me give you one example of something an association could go implement fairly easily as an experiment. We all know, and in some cases pretend to love, taxonomies. I don't know that anybody actually loves them. No offense to those who really do, but taxonomies are a real challenge because they're hard to define. They're really, really tough to get agreement on. And what is the taxonomy? They're tough to keep up to date because fields are constantly evolving. And then it's nearly impossible to actually classify all of your content relative to that taxonomy that you've just spent all this time and money building. Taxonomies, in my opinion, are not necessarily completely extinct at this point, but they're going to be largely extinct at some stage. You can use the natural language understanding of large language models to do a way better job of classifying your content than any taxonomy will ever give you. Now, I'm not saying if you've invested all this money and time in a taxonomy and your whole website and blah, blah, blah runs on it, throw it out. But in parallel with that, why don't you take all your content, run it into a language model, and then try to run some of the same business use cases that you use the taxonomy for against the language model and see how it performs. Won't hurt you. Don't put it on your website publicly yet. See what happens. And a number of our companies are doing exactly things like this. And it's a really interesting thing. I guarantee you this, even if you threw away all the work and said, we wouldn't use this, it's not ready for prime time or whatever, you learn so much from it that you'd figure out, oh, well, maybe we don't use it for taxonomies, but guess what? We can use it for these 5 other things that we would never have thought of. So that would be just one example of like a way to put guardrails up that are self-imposed in the sense of how you choose to deploy the technology. Do it in small doses, do it in ways that have mitigatable impact in terms of the downside risk. There's ways to do that with any kind of innovative change. It's not AI versus not AI. It's any kind of experiment.
Yeah. I think it brings up a question that I have for you, and that is, and it's off of the AI topic, kind of. But one of the things that you do is you identify, bright people that are coming out of universities and who are innovative already and looking for a challenge, and you look for good ideas. You look for creative thinking and things that you think that are worth an investment and to pursue. And I imagine that because that's the case, people are pitching you all the time for new ideas, things that they think are brilliant. So without naming names or giving too much information, what's one of the most exciting ideas that you were pitched recently? And I know that I didn't give you any heads up I was going to ask you this, but I'm just so curious to think about, like, what's something that, caught your attention and it was like, this is a fantastic idea, whether or not you decided to invest.
Yeah, and I love that question. And I do get tons of pitches all the time, both within the association market and then outside of the association market. I've done a lot of stuff, and it's interesting to see the kind of pitches you're getting now, because all of them talk about generative AI. All of them are repositioning existing companies as generative AI. Most of the blockchain companies now are calling themselves generative AI companies. So it's all good fun. But I do see a lot of those. I would tell you the one I'm most excited about at the moment is something that actually got this idea, kind of came to mind in our group of companies about 4 months ago, right around the time ChatGPT came out. So ChatGPT is based on a technology that was out 18 months before that called GPT-3 and now GPT-4. That's the underlying technology behind ChatGPT. And one of our companies had the idea that said, hey, what if we combined ChatGPT with the private content repo of the association? So the content corpus of the content repository of the association, and created, like what I said earlier about Bloomberg, like a private GPT experience against the association's content. Mm-hmm. And we got really excited about it. We decided to back it, and we launched this new company called BettyBot, and it's bettybot.ai. And BettyBot, it's first of all, it's named after a hidden figure in the computer science history, a lady who was one of the first 6 digital programmers in history of the ENIAC computer back in post-World War II era. But BettyBot is essentially ChatGPT trained against the association's content. And the use case is, imagine if you could provide a digital assistant to your member that was capable of helping them on a daily basis, like in a legitimately valuable way, right? So associations often say, oh, we engage continuously. And what that really means is they take a bullhorn up to the ear of the member and they blow out their eardrum. That's really what's happening.
Yeah.
That's not what I consider, like, I don't choose to be engaged that way, right, as a member, in most cases, right? Some associations are truly doing that, but most of the time it's like you have a steady stream of stuff, but I might find 1/5 of it, 1/10 of it, 1/100th of it useful. But what if you could give me a tool that I use in my job? So I'm an accountant, and every day I have questions about accounting. I have questions about my clients. I have questions about my own business. And what if I could have an interaction like ChatGPT, but with a trained expert in accounting who I trust? I know the content that trained that model is from a reputable source. Enter the association and a bot powered by Betty, which would basically be that is actually a valuable day-to-day assistant. So we got so excited about this because it's a cool technology, and I like technology, but that's not the reason. We got excited because it's the second bucket of opportunity that I mentioned earlier. First bucket is do what you do now, better, faster, cheaper. The second bucket is what could you do now that you have these enabling tools, right? Yeah. Now that we have airplanes, where can we fly versus where could we go only on land? Well, we have airplanes now, or we have spaceships now, where do we go? And so we think of Betty as this opportunity to really reposition the association as a daily actor in the lives of their members in a way that the members not only want, but they can't live without. Just like you don't want GPS taken away from you. You don't want ChatGPT taken away from you. Yeah. Well, we want the members of our association clients for this product to feel that way, that they can't live without this bot.
Oh, I love that idea. I mean, that is actually catering to each member so that they have their own interaction that's always going to be there to help them. That's always going to, I assume, learn with them and guide them and prompt them and all kinds of things. That's very exciting. Yeah. I'm glad I asked that question. That was a really great answer.
Just happens to be we've got one of those going on. So
that's so cool. I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, okay. So one of the things that that you shared with me before we went live today is that, the common question you get asked is, okay, well, how can I train my people, or where can people get training for this? And I wanted to go ahead and call that out because we do have an answer for you. And I'm going to go ahead and put this up for people who are watching right now. If you're watching this live or you're watching the replay, I just put up the link. If you're listening to this later on the audio podcast, I'll put this in the show notes. But right now, you'll see that there's a QR code. You can use your phone to scan that and get taken to a website. You can also plug in this URL. And there's a Sidecar AI bootcamp that's coming up. And this is a series of different live, and it's like live education, live webinars that are coming up that are, I hate using the word webinar because it's not like it's canned. It's like you're going to be interacting and learning from people. But this is going to walk you through, or walk your staff through AI and really practical applications for it into how you can use it for things like member engagement and how you can use it for thinking about things like marketing. And actually, I shouldn't be speaking to this because I don't know as much about it. Amith, what I know that you've been active and rolling out what this looks like. So
Sure. Yeah, no, thanks so much for that. The AI bootcamp that Sidecar is putting on it, and Sidecar, for those of your listeners that may not be familiar, is essentially an education website for association folks. So it's sidecarglobal.com, and the URL that's KiKi has on here, and the QR code goes directly to the page on this bootcamp. And Sidecar is basically trying to keep people aware and educate them on emerging technology and innovative practices. This bootcamp is 4 sessions of 90 minutes each. It's led by a couple of AI experts who are going to, in a very non-technical way, hold your hand through your learning experience. So 6 hours of content over 3 weeks where you're going to learn how to use these tools. It's not a conversation. It's actually hands-on. That's why we're calling it a boot camp. You're going to be working with AI in these sessions. So it is live. There will be some homework. It's a fairly limited investment of time and dollars, but it's something that you can do right now to actually go deeper than just talking about this. You know, people ask me all the time whenever I'm speaking on this topic, or if I'm having a one-on-one with an association leader, they say, well, what can we do right now? And I think it's the best question you can ask. It's my favorite question because it implies a mindset. You want to go do something. Well, here's a great opportunity. It's just go learn something and actually use it. And this is kind of like a hand-holding exercise where they're going to walk you through. I'll give you an example. The very first session that's going to be part of that series of 4 is about prompt engineering. And that's such a critical topic. Prompting AI really is a critical skill to learn. And it's not necessarily as intuitive as you might think. You know, it's like, yes, you're speaking to it in your language, in your natural language, but you have to understand the capabilities of these tools. And so that's the first session. And then their sessions build on it. So we're really excited about that.
yeah, I'm excited about it too. And everyone, I was telling Amith earlier, I was thinking about signing up for it because the truth is that we can all benefit from learning from this right now. And I don't know how many of you already know it, but there's even a prompt marketplace that's already out there. You can go, and I've actually tested some of these things out where for $1.99, you can buy, a really well vetted prompt for all of your podcast interview scripts. I haven't used it yet, but I actually did test to see like what you would get for something like that. And it's really, really interesting because a lot of people don't realize things like you can teach your instance of ChatGPT your own voice to talk in your voice. And that's something that's really important for organizations that are thinking about, okay, I want to use this more for developing my marketing and getting some of the content foundation created before, just so we can do bigger and better and more faster, right? So there's so many practical ways that you can use this, that it benefits you. It behooves you to go and take a course like this and learn what you can so that we can all, stay skilled and stay strong and stay on the front so that when the next wave comes, the next big change comes, that we're able to learn as we go along. Yeah.
I think that's, it's exactly what I'm telling people is just go learn this stuff. And whether you learn it through this boot camp or some other means, just take a step out of this conversation. You took the time to listen to this podcast or to watch us on a live stream. You spent 45 minutes, an hour of your time investing in this topic. Take the next step, go do something, go check out ChatGPT, go check out BettyBot. If you go to bettybot.ai, you can check out a live example of that on the Sidecar website. Go check out, if you're an artist, go check out one of the other tools like Midjourney or Dolly. They're super fun to work with and to play with. And they'll give you an idea of what's to come, and just, staying up to date is so critical. It's one of the things that people also ask a lot about is, what does this mean for my job? What does this mean for my team's jobs and so forth? The thing about employment of certain categories of skills is that you ultimately don't control that, right? Like that's, there are job categories that go away over time, and there's job categories that get created over time. One way to think about it is kind of in the pre-telecommunications era, there weren't switchboard operators. And then in the early days of telephones, in telegraphs as well, there were switchboard operators because there was manual switching. There were literally people in giant rooms that were switching things from port to port in order to connect calls, and telegraph operators that were like actually relaying telegraphs and all that. And so these technologies introduced those jobs because those jobs didn't need to exist in pre-telecom era. But then, of course, digital switching, automated switching, then digital switching came out. There are no switchboard operators anymore. So the question is what's going to be the switchboard operator opportunity that gets created? Maybe prompt engineering is that, because right now the AI isn't that great, honestly. It's still very rudimentary. So prompt engineering is a thing. We got to learn it. Maybe it's something we got to learn and use for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And at some point, it kind of goes the way of the switchboard operator because the AI is smart enough to just know what you need.
Yeah, I think that that's such a great point. And I really do. I love it. If we embrace what you talked about at the very beginning, which is just, being curious and cultivating that sense of curiosity, then hopefully we'll be able to sort of adapt and change and go with the flow and learn the things that we need to learn as time goes on.
Well, and we'll have a lot better time doing it too. So
Yes, absolutely. Well, okay. So before I let you go, we teased that there was a new book that's coming out. Can you tell us just a little bit about the book and when we can look for that to come out soon?
Sure. So I'll just start by saying my last book, which was released in 2018, was called The Open Garden Organization. And that was about this idea of embracing digital, but embracing the mindset of building an audience that's much broader than membership necessarily. So say, hey, put the stake in the ground that says, we are the experts in this topic and build your brand. It's essentially a content marketing strategy for associations. And this book kind of builds on the Open Garden Organization in a way. It talks about this digital assistant idea that I mentioned earlier. It talks about generative AI, but essentially the book is about the rise of the artificially intelligent association. That's the subtitle. The actual title is in progress right now, but essentially the book it's essentially a guidebook for every association leader, ranging from entry level to the most seasoned CEO, on how they should think about AI. And there's a little bit of what is AI, but then there's how they should think about AI, a lot of very association specific ideas for use cases, and then a framework for thinking about, how do you go about doing this stuff? So it's going to be a business book that will be released this summer. I'm hoping to have it out in June. And it's going to be a living book, meaning an online digital book. It's going to have print editions as well that are released every so often, probably every 6 months or so. This is a very fast moving field. So by the time we're here in June, that's 3 months from now, it's going to be some radical change. So we're going to keep updating this book. It'll be on the Sidecar website. It'll be available in print. We'll do an audiobook. The audiobook is going to be auto-generated by an AI. We're not going to use the human voiceover for that. Yeah. And by the way, just in case anyone was wondering, based on what I just said, am I using AI to create the book on AI? You better believe it. And so, it's something that I think of AI as it's an assistant, right? So I'm not having the book written for me by AI. I'm writing the book, but I'm using AI as a way of accelerating it. I'm also using it as a way of a brainstorming partner where I want to talk about other topics that might be helpful in this area, or how can I rewrite this in order to make it more approachable? I have a pretty technical background, so I tend to go into the weeds sometimes when it isn't necessary. So I've said, hey, ChatGPT, here's a 1,000-word section I just wrote about blah, blah, blah. Can you make it more understandable for a non-technical audience? And it comes back with something pretty damn good. So I'm excited about it. Anyway, so to answer your question, KiKi, it's coming out in the June timeframe.
I love that. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today and to talk with everyone. I know that this is such a hot topic right now, and I couldn't think of anyone better to really just give some insight into what all of this means and can mean for the association industry. And so thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing this resource. And everyone, if you want to connect or if you want to find out more, go and check out this AI boot camp. Go and learn from this series of lessons. Connect with Amith, or at least follow Amith on LinkedIn, because he posts stuff all the time there. You post some really, really helpful information all the time. And, I guess if there's anything else as far as you're looking for inspiration or ideas, then of course, follow Amith, look on LinkedIn, follow Sidecar, subscribe to Ross's newsletters at your associations, and then follow Association Chat, right? That's a great suggestion. Amith, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. I don't know about you, but I thought that that was a phenomenal, phenomenal conversation. And I just learned so much. And it also completely validated our ideas with Association Chat about community, curiosity, and creativity, really pursuing those things always in life. So that's all for our show today. Until next time, Association Adventurers, keep asking questions to learn every day. Because why? Because as Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Have a great rest of the week, everyone.